Vitavenim Cheruvacha Ityaputta Varaso Shalileshwa Kurakranta Upadatta Vatavidim Vacha Shimanaso Munibi Brahmapadibi Salide Swakura Kranta Upadatta Vitavanim Maitre Ruvacha Munibi Brahmapadibi Maitreya Ruvacha. The sage Maitreya said, Iti, thus, upasti yamana, being praised by, aso, Lord Bore, munibi, by the great sages, brahmavadibi, by the transcendentalists, salile, on the water, swakura akrante, touched by his own hooves, upadata, placed, avita, the maintainer, avanim, the earth. Translation. The sage Maitreya said, the Lord, being thus worshipped by all the great sages and transcendentalists, touched the earth with his hooves and placed it on the water. Responsively, please. The sage Maitreya said, the Lord, being thus worshipped by all the great sages and transcendentalists, touched the earth with his hooves and placed it on the water. So this is Maitreya Rishi. He's concluding this section, at least, of the pastime. Because as I mentioned the other day, Madhura, because he's inspired by the topics of the Lord, he inquires further, and I think it goes up to about chapter 19, this pastime, so of Varaha killing Hiranyaksha and picking up the earth from the lower regions. The earth was placed on the water, this is Srila Prabhupada's purport. The earth was placed on the water by his inconceivable potency. The Lord is all-powerful, and therefore he can sustain the huge planets either on the water or in the air as he likes. The tiny human brain cannot conceive how these potencies of the Lord can act. Man can give some vague explanation of the laws by which such phenomena are made possible, but actually the tiny human brain is unable to conceive of the activities of the Lord, which are therefore called inconceivable. Yet the frog philosophers still try to give some imaginary explanation. Prabhupada's really given it to them, eh? The frog philosophers. And we all know the story of Dr. Frog, where he's living in his well, and a friend comes back and tells him, obviously a friend frog, comes back and tells him about the Pacific Ocean. And his friend is telling him how vast the Pacific Ocean is, because you go to the shore of the Pacific Ocean, we can just go down here and look out at the Pacific Ocean. You can't see the other side. It's vast, And so the Dr. Frog, he's trying to understand the size of the Pacific Ocean. And he says, is it as big as my well? Oh, no, it's much bigger than that. And so he starts, the frogs, the bullfrogs, they have this big sort of bag at the front which helps them to make their noises. So he started to swell up his bag, and is it this big? He made it bigger. Is it this big? And he kept making it bigger and bigger and bigger. And finally, and his friend kept saying, no, it's much, much bigger than that. And he kept sort of swelling it up bigger and bigger. And finally it burst and he died. So the frog philosophers are like that, that they try to perceive of the greatness of God or the greatness of the creation based on their own experience. But actually, we have to understand that our own experience is so limited. We can't actually perceive of the greatness of Krishna or the greatness of the creation based on our own limited experience. Because what is our experience? How vast, or how broad is our experience? It's even like, even just like this one city, or even this one suburb of Sydney, North Sydney. How much of this do we know? Or even this building. How much of this building do you know? It's like we have some knowledge, and it may be, quite broad, but it's not comprehensive. I mean, how many of you have been underneath a building? And explored up underneath the altar here, or down this side here, and there's like, it's just like there's more to it than we're aware of. Yet, we have, due to false ego, we conclude to know so much about, whatever the topic is, and we see, the scientists in this day and age, they've been like this. That they try to like, they'll look at something and they'll analyze something, and then they'll extrapolate to cover, because this is like this and this is like, therefore that is. But they can't conclude based on that, because like the rest of this universe, for instance, how much can you understand about the universe or other universes or whatever? How much can you understand based on our experience here? Just because it's like this here doesn't necessarily mean it's like this somewhere else. Just because here in Australia, things are done in a certain way, doesn't mean you go to another country it's going to be exactly the same. It could be vastly different. And so this is the point that Prabhupada is making here, is like based on their tiny experience, they're trying to understand the whole creation. And factually, that they cannot, because the Lord's potency, he says, Parasya Shakti Vividaya Shriyate, he has so many unlimited, multifarious potencies. They're all varied, and they all have different functions and different purposes. And just by observing this one limited planet, this tiny little planet, they're trying to understand the whole creation. They're trying to understand the Creator based on their own experience, and they'll never do that. It's just like, they like people falsely conclude, well, my body's limited. My body has a beginning and an end. Therefore, the Creator must also have a beginning and an end. They conclude that, you look at the impersonalists, for instance. They conclude that this body is suffering, and when I'm experiencing the world through senses and your mind, intelligence, etc., it's suffering. Therefore, the ultimate reality must be without a body. It must be impersonal. But because they have no experience of transcendence, because they have no experience of transcendental form, therefore they erroneously conclude that there is no form beyond this. This is the form, and this form causes me suffering. Therefore, to achieve the supreme destination means a destination without form. So you can see how, because of their limited experience, they wrongly conclude what the reality is. But we can understand from the teachings of the Shastras that there is a reality beyond this, beyond what we understand. There is a transcendental form, there is a transcendental experience, there is a transcendental world. Where, and this is described in a lot of detail in the Brahma Samhita and so many other literatures. Even we find in the next chapter, I think the next chapter is called something like the Kingdom of God or something. No, that's the pregnancy. Oh, it's chapter 15, a description of the kingdom of God. Because what happens is the four Kumaras, they go and visit. They want to visit Narayan, but when they get there, they're blocked. But it's talking about the what they see when they get there and how wonderful the place is. So because people don't have an experience beyond this material, this temporary, limited material world, they conclude wrongly that either that there is no form beyond this, or the form beyond this must be like that. But they don't have any experience. And also, when coming to try to understand the Supreme, when we try to, and we all do this, when we try to understand the Supreme based on our experience, we've got to be wrong, because everything in our experience is limited. And to try to understand something unlimited through a limited experience is not possible. If you're counting numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, how can you conceive of infinity? If your boundaries are within 1 to 0, then how can you conceive infinity? There's no possibility, because infinity means there is no end. And this is the nature of God. Because we are finite. We have very finite capacities. How can we understand infinite? There's no limit. And as such, we can understand there's no limit to what Krishna can do. The scientists, they have their theory of gravity, and it's a theory. They have their theory of gravity, but they don't actually know how these planets float, how they're floating in the air, how they float on water. And they'll give you different ideas, but okay, look at the human body, right? As long as there's a life force in the human body will float on water. As soon as the life force leaves, it'll float for a little while, then it'll sink. Why? They'll give different reasons, but it's because of the living entity. So in the same way, they're concluding or speculating different things, theory of gravity, this thing, that thing. But how is it that these universes are floating in space? They are floating. There's an interesting discussion. I just want to read it to you from the 7th chapter of the 2nd canto. This is also describing this pastime, but this is called scheduled incarnations with specific functions. And it's describing Varaha Dev there. Since the beginning of creation, the demons and the demigods, or the actually, that's not what I'll read. Only under certain conditions do the planets float as weightless balls in the air. So it's really interesting. Prabhupada is describing this as weightless balls in the air. And as soon as these conditions are disturbed, the planets may fall down in the Garbhodak ocean, which covers half the universe. So this is what's happened here, is Hiranyaksha disturbed the floating condition of the earth, and therefore it went down into the Garbhodak ocean. And when Varaha Dev, when he lifted it out, he invested the floating Shakti back into the earth. Which covers half the other. So it says here, may fall down in the Garbhodak ocean, which covers half the universe. So we have this 4 billion mile diameter, I think it is, orb, and then the lower half is water, and the upper half is where all the planets are. The other half is the spherical dome within the innumerable planetary system, within which the innumerable planetary systems exist. The floating of the planets in the weightless air is due to the inner constitution of the globes. The scientists have got no idea of this. They think inside the earth is this thing, that thing. They speculate. They've never been there. They've never actually been inside, but they drilled down a little way, but they haven't drilled down, what's the earth? It's 24,000 kilometers around. And they haven't drilled down, like however many thousand kilometers it is to go down to the center of the earth. They've never done it. So how do they know what's there? They speculate. They have no true understanding. The floating of the planets in the weightless air is due to the inner constitution of the globes, and the modernized drilling of the earth to exploit oil from within is a sort of disturbance by the modern demons and can result in a greatly harmful reaction to the floating condition of the earth. A similar disturbance was created formerly by the demons headed by Hiranyaksha, the great exploiter of the gold rush. It's really interesting how Prabhupada presents that. And the earth was detached from its weightless condition and fell down into the Garbhodak ocean. The Lord, as the maintainer of the whole creation of the material world, therefore assumed the gigantic form of a boar with a proportionate snout. So he must have a big snout. And picked up the earth from within the water of the Garbhodak. And then he quotes Jayadev Goswami. So, and there's a few conversations where devotees were asking Prabhupada about this statement from the 271. And they're saying, well, they're drilling the oil out. What's going to happen when all the oil's taken? And Prabhupada said the earth will be destroyed. Meaning not completely destroyed, but it'll lose its condition as we know it, and it will likely sink again into the Garbhodak ocean. So this is what they're doing by removing the oil from the earth. Because we understand, if you put oil in water, what does it do? It floats. It creates this, and so it creates the floating condition of the earth also. So somehow or other, when Hiranyaksha, when he disturbed the floating condition of the earth, it sunk down into the Garbhodak ocean, and then Varaha, he came along, he picked it up, and and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions how he reinvested his floating Shakti. So whatever he did, I don't know. It may be, maybe somehow or other he put oil back in there or something, I don't know. Because he does pierce the earth with his tusk. And Mahaprabhu explains that when he pierced the earth with his tusk, he impregnated the earth. And then Narakasura was born as a result of that. So it's kind of interesting that Narakasura is actually the son of the Lord Raha. But it's very, very interesting the way these pastimes play out. But I think like the main, there's a few interesting points here. Another interesting point I also thought was in the verse it says Swa Kuru Akrante. He touched with his own hooves. So he touched the earth with his own hooves and then placed it on the water. So when we look at our position here on the earth planet, we're actually so fortunate to be living on a planet that was, not only did he touch it with his hooves when he was doing this, but also the Lord walked on this earth in the form of Krishna, in the form of Rama, and in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this earth is a duly sanctified place because the Lord has walked on the planet. And we see that even Bhumi Devi, she laments when Krishna winds up his pastimes, how her surface is no longer going to be marked with the elephant goad, the lotus flower, all these marks that are on Krishna's lotus feet. So it's a very, very auspicious thing for the earth also to have the Lord touching her. And it's also auspicious for us because we're residing in a place that the earth is blessed by his lotus feet. And whether it's this part of the world or another part of the world, the Lord still walked on this planet. So it makes the planet very, very auspicious. And we're very fortunate we have this opportunity. And also, to be taking birth so soon after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared. It was only, 500 years ago that he was here. So, we're very fortunate to have this position. It's kind of interesting how Prabhupada also says here in the purport that, it talks about how the water was placed on the earth was placed in the water by his inconceivable potency, and then, as I mentioned, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur said the Shakti of this buoyancy or floating, he invested that in there. And Prabhupada says the tiny human brain cannot conceive how these potencies of the Lord can act. And even we see sometimes there's a really interesting story in the Krishna book or the Bhagavatam where the pastime of the Aghasura demon, and you see there, and just to give you an idea, because we can never truly understand, because Prabhupada often say we have a tiny pea-like brain, a very small brain. Even I saw someone the other day walking around with a T-shirt of Albert Einstein, a picture of Albert Einstein. And Albert Einstein was a brilliant person, there's no doubt of that. Very, very smart. But still, small brain. But at least he had a bit of humility, and he realized that he had limited capacity. He realized that. But there's an interesting story, pastime, where when the Aghasura demon manifests, and he's there, and he opens his mouth up, and it describes how his mouth is actually, up in the clouds. The top of the mouth is disturbing the clouds. So huge mouth. And then the cowherd boys, they look at this, and they think, "Oh, what is this, Is this some gigantic snake or something, And they can smell the breath coming out. They said, let's go and play in there, because Krishna's going to come and save us. And so they go into the snake's mouth, and then it describes there in the Krishna book how Krishna became stunned. Now the materialistic person interpret that as, oh, how can he be God? He didn't know what to do. But the Acharyas interpret that quite differently. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says that actually Krishna, this is in the Sarata Darshini, he says that Krishna was just amazed at how his Shaktis are working. That they're creating these wonderful pastimes, and even the cowherd boys, they're just walking into these situations knowing that Krishna's going to save him. And so Krishna himself was marveling at his own Shaktis. So if Krishna marvels at them, what hope have we got of understanding them? Or what hope have the materialistic people have got of understanding Krishna's amazing potencies? So all in all, it's not possible for us to understand Krishna's potencies or Krishna's, the length and breadth or the I'm not sure what the right word to use here is, but the expanse of Krishna's capabilities. It's just, and the thing is also, it's described in the Shastra how, with Radha and Krishna, their attraction for each other is, and their love for each other and their potencies are constantly expanding. So, and this is the meaning of unlimited, because everything we know, everything we've experienced in this world has a finite capacity. Even you look at the tallest mountain, Mount Everest. It still has a finite capacity. It's not like it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's just like you can't find the end of it. No, people have walked to the top of it. They've been on top of that mountain. So it's finite. Even though, according to the scientists, because the tectonic plates are moving and those mountains are slowly growing, but they still are finite because we can perceive the limit of their extent. Whereas with Krishna and Krishna's potencies, there is no limit because they're constantly expanding, and you cannot reach the end of them. And it's described how Anantashesh, with his 10,000 hoods, actually sometimes it says 10,000, sometimes it says unlimited, with his unlimited hoods, he's constantly chanting the glories of Krishna, and he never reaches the end of them. So if this is the case, and we accept that, because it's stated in the Shastra and confirmed by the Acharyas, if this is the case, how can we, with our limited capacity, even come close to understanding Krishna, or what Krishna can do, what Krishna can achieve? So this is quite extraordinary. This, because a gentleman came and asked me the other day, on Sunday after we gave class, on Varaha Dev, and he was just puzzled how Krishna could take the form of a boar. But that's just because we're putting a material concept, material imposition upon Krishna. If you think that Krishna has a material form, and if you think Krishna is a limited living entity like we are, then of course you're going to be puzzled that, because you're saying, but the boar is such a dirty creature. How can he do that? Because he's God. And you think this is a dirty creature? No, it's a transcendental form. So, and it's the same, like I mentioned to this gentleman, Krishna takes on so many forms. It mentions, Prahlad Maharaj mentions in the 7th canto, when he's praying to Krishna, he says, you descend, he says you incarnate in all species of life. There's 8,400,000 species of life. Krishna appears in every one of them. Paratanaya saranam vinashchaya dushkritam, to liberate or to, for the pleasure of devotees and to annihilate the miscreants. Was it Glani Bhavati Bharata? When religious principles become glani, when they become destroyed, he comes to re-establish the religious principles. So, just because we can't conceive of how Krishna would come as an ant form, or how he might come as an amoeba, or how he might come as a snake, or whatever, a worm in stool. I mean, we how can we conceive of these things? But he does, and he's not contaminated by that experience. And he comes to annihilate the miscreants, to annihilate demonic persons, and to re-establish principles of religion, but also to benedict the conditioned living entities. Every incarnation he comes, he re-establishes religious principles, but also for those who are caught up in the material nature, who are conditioned, but who may have done, performed some degree of piety or whatever, he comes for their benefit, so that they can reawaken their God consciousness. Because ultimately, the condition or the position of all living entities is to reside in the spiritual world with Krishna. But where we are now, this is artificial. This is not our real place. So only by Krishna descending and by his liberated devotees descending do we get the chance to go back to Godhead. Because Krishna consciousness is not a do-it-yourself process. We can only become a pure devotee by the association of pure devotee. So if personalities like Srila Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and these other devotees don't come into this world, or Krishna himself doesn't come into this world as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or whatever form he takes, what's the hope for us? So therefore it's very important that the Lord descends. And when the Lord descends, he does so to give us this opportunity to take to the practice of Krishna consciousness. But it's not just, because again, it's the limited concept of human beings. When they look at, children of God or whatever term you choose to use, they feel that only applies to humans. But actually all living entities, Krishna says, Aham bija pradapita, that I am the seed-giving father of all living entities. He doesn't say I'm the seed-giving father of humans. He says, no, I'm the seed-giving father of all living entities. So again, their limited perception, Christian perception, whatever you want to call it, their limited perception is just, focusing on those in human bodies. But we see that, the creation is much vaster than that. Even we find that in some religious traditions, they don't even believe that humans have a soul. Animals have a soul. And some even believe that women don't have souls. They think only men have them. So how limited is that? And really, it's about trying to manipulate and control those other living entities, or be able to kill them, because they don't have a soul, so they actually they're meant for me to eat. So they twist philosophy in order to suit their basically their sense gratification. But the philosophy of Krishna consciousness is so much broader than that. We don't just say that you have a soul because it's like, well, I've got a phone in my pocket, No, the soul is you. This is you, but you have a body. It's completely opposite from what people think, because most people are thinking, this is me. So you can see, due to their limited knowledge, due to their limited understanding, they got the whole thing wrong. They're thinking, this is me. This is how I experience the world. No, actually, you don't experience the world through this. You experience the world through you, the consciousness. Otherwise, if it was just a body, how could you experience anything? Because you'd have no awareness of it. So because they have this really limited perception of reality, I don't think they even have any idea what reality is. But because they have this really limited perception, they can never actually experience truth. Only when they come into contact with a devotee or transcendental literature or prasadam or whatever, does the understanding start to waken up. But also, like for ourselves, we have to be careful, because we bring our baggage You hear this term about, people bringing their baggage into a relationship or something like that. We bring our baggage into Krishna consciousness as well. Our conditioning, we bring that into Krishna consciousness, and we, impose that upon our practice of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, we have so many different ideas, and then we see that devotees try to understand things through their past experiences, and then they'll implant their past experiences on the practice of Krishna consciousness. And majority of times it's just not right. And then if you try to understand these things through the teachings of the Acharya, try to understand these things through the teaching of the Gita, then we can start to get a better idea. So often you will hear devotees saying things which are not actually the Siddhanta. They're based on their past conditionings. Or, like, for instance, things we do in deity worship. There's so many things we do in deity worship which are based on our conditionings. Like sometimes you might see devotees when they bathe the deities, for instance. I've seen this in different temples. They'll take a face washer and wet the face washer, dipping their fingernails in the water, which means the water's become contaminated, and they'll wring the face washer out over the deity's head, like they would do with a baby. So they're thinking the deity's their baby or something like that, and they're bringing that into Krishna consciousness with them. Or then, like I saw someone the other day cuddling they bring their deity in to the temple, and they're cuddling their deity like it's a baby. No, this is our Lord. In order to get the benefit of the process, you have to understand the relationship. If you impose your own relationship on it, you're not going to get the full benefit of the process. And this doesn't apply just to deity worship. This applies to the whole practice. At this stage of our evolution in devotional service, because we are contaminated, we have to accept that we are contaminated. Therefore, we need to follow Vaidhi. We need to follow the rules. Why? To remove the contamination. If we don't follow the rules given by the Acharya, and this is in the 20th chapter, no, is it 22nd chapter, I think it is, of the Madhya Lila. I might have the chapter wrong, but anyhow. Mahaprabhu explains to Sanatana Goswami the 64 practices of bhakti, or devotional service. And he starts with Guru Parashaya Diksha Guru Sevana Saddhamma Siksha Priksha Sadhu Marga Anugamana. This is the first 5 must-dos. So Guru Parashaya, you take shelter of the lotus feet of the spiritual master. Guru Parashaya Diksha, receive initiation from him. Guru Sevana, then you serve the Guru. Saddhamma Siksha Priksha, you follow the rules and regulations of devotional service. This is like a beginning of bhakti. Not you just make up your own process. You make up your own process, who knows where you're going to wind up? Who knows where? What sort of loka you're going to go to? You've got no idea. And there's sadhu marga anugamana is the 5th one, to follow the path chalked out by the Mahajans, as it says in the Mahabharata. Mahajani Enikata Sapanta. This is because the secret of bhakti is locked in their heart. The Guhayam mentions how it's locked in their heart. And only by service of the great Mahajans, by following their footsteps, do they unlock this secret. So we need to be very careful in our practice of bhakti that we don't, just like Prabhupada's describing here, we have a tiny perception of reality. We need to give that up and just accept that perception which is given to us through the scriptures and through the acharyas. Then we'll start to understand. Because it can't be understood with material consciousness. It can't be understood with material vision. It can only be understood. It's just like we see in the 11th chapter of the Gita. Arjuna was asking Krishna, please show me that form, the universal form. And he says, behold my mystic opulence. He says, but you can't see it with these eyes. I give you transcendental eyes. So how are you going to see the transcendental form of Krishna with these eyes? You can't. How are you going to understand Krishna through this material consciousness? You can't. It's as simple as that. It's only when Krishna blesses us with this transcendental vision that you can actually understand these things. And understanding Krishna doesn't mean you know everything about Krishna, because you can't. It's not physically possible. Even Krishna doesn't know everything about himself. And if he doesn't know everything about himself, what's the chance we've got? So, when we become adequate, sufficiently purified, and receive the mercy, it's only through. I was having a conversation with Madhu Mangal about this yesterday. That it's only when you receive this blessing of Krishna will you actually understand. You can't. It's like you can't force your way into the spiritual world. You can't buy a ticket to the spiritual world. You go down to whatever they call that place, and you go and buy a ticket for the bus. It's okay, you can get around on the bus, but you can't buy a ticket to Krishna Loka. You can't buy a ticket, to go back to Krishna or to know Krishna. No, this can only come about by mercy, and that's why I was saying to Mother Mangal how Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he talked about the example of the monkey and its baby, how like the monkeys that they carry their baby around on their back. The baby holds onto the hair, and sometimes they've seen it in Vrindavan. The monkeys will jump, and the baby falls off, and the mother just sits there and she's just screaming, because the baby's fallen off. So the baby has to climb back up and get on. Yeah? And then the other analogy that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gives is the cat. So actually he compares the monkey analogy to the Mayavadis. They're believing by their own endeavor they're going to achieve liberation. And then he also used the analogy of the cat, how the kitten, they're helpless and they just wait for the mother to come pick them up and then carry them around and move them. And he said, that this is like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, this is like the Christians. So he said we have to be like the cat and the kitten, and the cat and the kitten and the monkey and its baby. We have to be a combination of both. We work hard in the practice of bhakti. We apply ourselves to the practice of bhakti, but we're dependent upon the mercy of Krishna, because we know that only by his mercy can we actually achieve the destination. So it's a very interesting process. And very, very interesting section. I find all sections of the Bhagavatam interesting, but this is also very interesting. How Krishna appears out of his mercy in the form of a boar, because the boar is the right form to go down into that horrible place. Because it's just like at the bottom of the ocean, that's where all the muck is. All the stool from the fish and all the refuse from the plants and all the rubbish that the human beings dump into the ocean and stuff, that's all down the bottom. It all sinks down there. And so, you wouldn't have Krishna in his beautiful two-armed form playing the flute, diving down there, So he comes in a form that's just appropriate. And only the devotees can understand that. Even we see at the start of this chapter how Lord Brahma was a little bit like, okay, what's going on here? Who's this? Like this little, like this big comes out of his nose and then flies up there and just becomes huge. How huge is he going to be to lift the planet? Brahma's body is also quite large, larger than we can imagine. But how huge is this form got to be to lift this orb that's 24,000 kilometers around the equator? That'd be pretty big. And he rested on his tusk between his tusk and he's got tusk there and his nose there, and he's holding it on his snout. Must be pretty big. Probably beyond what we can see. And then so he's like looking at this form and he's like, no, I don't know what this is. And then him and Atri Muni and others, they're arguing about it. What is this? Then the Lord roared. They're still arguing about it. Then he roared again, and he infused in them the understanding. And they understood who it was. They became enlivened. Oh, this is our Lord. And they started off with glorification and prayers. So, pretty extraordinary pastime. And Krishna's pastime, you look at it, because we've got the Nrsimha Chatturdasi coming up in a few months, and it's like another extraordinary pastime, Hiranyakashipu, he thought he had all the boxes ticked. He thought, I got it made. I can't die. I can't die in the night. I can't die in the day. I can't die inside, outside. I can't die by the hand of any man or demigod or any weapon. What else is there? I got it made. I'm eternal. Krishna figured that one out pretty easily. Even like that story of what was the demon that asked for a blessing from Vritrasura? Vritrasura asked for the benediction from Lord Shiva. That he could, anyone's head he touched it split into 1,000 pieces. And then he started to chase after Lord Shiva because he wanted Lord Shiva's wife. And then so the Lord manifested himself as a young Brahmana and tricked him. He said, "Oh, look, everyone knows this Lord Shiva gives these bogus benedictions. Well, you touch your own head, you'll see." He touches his own head and split into 1,000 pieces. And then the Lord said to Shiva, says, "Don't go giving such benedictions anymore. It's not a good idea." So we see that Krishna, he's incredible what he does. It's like every time you read these pastimes, it's just extraordinary what Krishna does. And we try to understand it with our little brain. You know, there's no understanding. It's just extraordinary. Okay, finish there. Any questions, comments, corrections? Anyone want their money back? Yeah, the chamber.
Might be a slightly technical question, but someone asked me this, you see a picture of Radha that was holding a spherical globe, which makes us. So was it Bhakti, a spherical Bhakti that they were holding, or was it like this mandala?
From my understanding, you know, because both realities are there. They're both realities. But my understanding is the earth as an orb. Yeah? Because, you know, Prabhupada talks here in the 7th chapter, the 2nd canto, how they're floating, like I think he says globes or orbs or something like that. Yeah, they float as weightless balls in the air. So it seems like it was, you know, it was actually the earth orb, and that was pushed down in the water. That's my understanding of what he's saying there. But you know, the Bhu Mandala, that's another reality that's there. It's on a different dimension. I remember listening to a class years ago where Sridharananda Maharaj was asked something similar. I mean, I don't understand how they're existing simultaneously. That's just beyond my capacity to understand. But Sridharananda Maharaj was saying that is also there. You know, the different perceptions of the universe. One is very much a gross perception, like what we're seeing. You know, all the planets and that. That's very much a gross perception, whereas the perception of the Bhu Mandala is more subtle. But, you know, it take a brain bigger than mine to understand that. And that's the thing, you know, I think, you know, we need to just realize that there are things we just won't understand. And it fits into the category of Achincha. It's just like, you know, there's a conversation or discussion going on right now about Guru Tattva. And my understanding of Guru Tattva has always been that it's inconceivable. And so, you know, you can understand so much about it, but when it comes down to it, just like, you know, you look at the devotees, for instance, who are you know, taking on the service, and it is a service. It's not a post or a position that they're really elevated. It's a service. It's the same as like, you know, I do a service, what I do. You do a service, what you do. And it's not like we're wonderful. The service is awesome. You know, the fact that we can serve Krishna is awesome. But I'm just, you know, a jiva, a tiny jiva trying to do some service for Krishna. And so it's the same with the Guru when they take on this service. But then if you look at it, you know, like some of the personalities who are performing the service now, you look at their backgrounds, where they came from, meat eating, intoxication, gambling, illicit sex, the whole deal. You know? And now they're as good as God. Figure that one out. It's inconceivable. It's just the inconceivable potency of Krishna. That because they've given their life to canvas on Krishna's behalf, somehow or other he's invested them with some kind of capacity to deliver fallen conditioned souls. So there's so many things within this process, because, you know, this is mundane, material. This brain is mundane. As long as we try to understand the transcendental with this, it's just not going to work. They're incompatible. So we need to develop transcendental consciousness. Then we can understand it. But it doesn't, like I said before, it doesn't mean you're going to know everything about it. It just means you'll understand the nature. You'll understand how it, to some extent, how it's functioning. But yeah, I mean, the transcendental realm is inconceivable. That's my understanding of it. It's just inconceivable. Inconceivable means that you can't conceive it. You can't really figure it out. I mean, just Krishna, talking about the other day, Sakatasura, tiny little baby, like, like this, And he starts to become so heavy that Mother Yasoda can no longer carry him. So she puts him down under a cart. This is pastime. He realized this cart was a demon. She puts him down under the cart. He kicks the cart with his tiny little foot, and he completely smashes it. How's that? If you apply normal intelligence to it, that doesn't work. So you just have to accept these things, I guess. Anything else? Yes, Prabhu. You always have good questions.
Just from a layman perspective, I know the Prabhupada actually stressed so much on the inconceivability of mind, which is one of the last people. From a layman perspective, when we actually say this heavy, it's actually
So?
floating on water. It's floating on water, what it actually says in the shloka. How do you convince me that he actually tries to come up with an argument? The scientists call it the satellite. They can only see the Earth is actually floating in the air, not on the water. So how do we try to convince those people?
Yeah, I don't, people who don't want to be convinced can't be convinced. You just can't. You can't convince them. Yeah, but pashanapina pashiti. It's right in front of their face. Everyone's dying. Everyone is dying. Like one time, a reporter in I think it was in America asked Prabhupada, why is the death rate in India so high? Prabhupada said, no, death rate in India is the same everywhere. A death rate is the same everywhere, 100%. But still, the Bhagavatam declares, Pashanapi napashati. Even though they're seeing everyone else is dying, still they're convinced they're not going to die. How are you going to convince such a person? Everyone around them is dying and they think they're not going to die. The scientist is going to find the solution. What solutions have they found so far? I mean, I don't want to get into that because I've got some very strong views on those types of things, but what solutions have they found so far? Whose life have they extended? They're injecting us all full of poisons. It's probably going to decrease all their lives. So, how will you convince such a person? It's not possible. And in terms of like a lay person's perspective, I mean, to conceive something like this, it's like to understand the internet would be easier. To count how many atoms there are in the universe, that's possible. To understand this is not possible. Not without material consciousness. So, you can try, you can use analogies and stuff like that, which may give them some kind of, and that's the purpose of analogies. You have to kind of give an analogy that's sort of appropriate for the concept you're trying to express, because oftentimes people give analogies which aren't really appropriate. And so maybe you could talk about how many atoms there are in the universe and stuff like that. So to understand this is like trying to count the atoms in the universe, although the atoms can be counted because they are finite. Anything finite can be comprehended, even though it may be very, very vast. It's like Dr. Frog trying to understand the Pacific Ocean, but you can measure how far it is from Sydney to Los Angeles. It is a finite distance, and it can be measured. Maybe not with a tape measure, but you can measure it. Krishna's potency, you can't measure it because it's ever expanding, ever increasing. So, yeah. There's a phrase that Vaisheshika Prabhu sometimes quotes, which I very much like. He says, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And you can lead a man to knowledge, but you can't make him think. I think that's very appropriate, because, you can give someone everything they need to grasp these concepts. But if they don't have the sufficient piety, if they don't have the inclination where they want to understand these things, they'll never accept it. They'll just never accept. Like, I saw something yesterday. There's a Facebook group in Moolumba, on Facebook, but it's folks. I mean, I don't recommend Facebook to anyone. So it's just like the worst thing going. But anyhow, there's a Facebook group called Moolumba Matters, and someone wrote on the group that Coles has run out of meat. Oh, haram, so horrible, they've run out of meat, I can't feed my children. So then one devotee got on there and started to quote these facts about meat eating and how your life will be longer if you eat meat, if you don't eat meat, so if you're vegetarian. And then someone puts up, oh, this is written by a vegan. Of course you're going to expect them to say stuff like that, But the thing is, and there's a whole lot of people there was just like bagging this devotee for putting this up on an open forum like that. And the fact of it is, it's like, these people don't want to know about that sort of stuff. They love eating meat. It's like, why would you bother, trying to convince them elsewise? But no, if someone's a little bit receptive, then there's a chance. But if they're not receptive, don't waste your time. Give them Krishna Prasad, maybe give them a book or something like that. Try to encourage them to, at least hear the holy name or something, but, to try and convince them of philosophy. Good luck. Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Nitai Go Premanandi. Hari Hari. Mm.